Learn English through story. The dark whisper of lust. In the heart of a bustling city, where skyscrapers kissed the sky and life pulsed with unyielding energy, there lived a woman named Julia. She was in her late 30s, a talented architect known for her dedication and hard work. Her colleagues respected her, her clients admired her vision. Yet, despite her successes, Julia felt a hollowness within her of what no amount of accolades or late nights at the office could fill. Her marriage to Mark had once been a source of joy. They had been college sweethearts, bound by shared dreams and aspirations. But as the years wore on, the passion that had ignited their love slowly faded, replaced by routine and unspoken disappointment. Conversations turned superficial, intimacy became scarce, and the laughter that once filled their home was now a distant memory. Mark was often absorbed in his own world, focused on his work, and Julia found herself increasingly alone, drowning in a sea of loneliness. One rainy evening, as she returned home from a long day at work, Julia caught sight of a book lying on the coffee table. The Dark Whisper of Lust. It was a gift from her friend Lisa, who had insisted it was a must-read. Julia had initially dismissed it, thinking it trivial, but now it intrigued her. In a moment of desperation, craving excitement and distraction, she picked it up and flipped through the pages. The book was filled with stories of passion, lust, and the consequences of giving into one's desires. Each tale was a seductive whisper, promising the thrill of forbidden love, the heat of stolen moments, and the intoxicating rush that came from indulging in one's deepest cravings. As she read, Julia felt her heart race, her pulse quicken. The stories ignited something within her, a spark of longing she had buried for too long. That night, unable to sleep, Julia found herself immersed in the book. Each page drew her deeper into a world of desire. The characters leapt off the page, their passion palpable, their hunger for each other all-consuming. With each story, she felt a growing restlessness within herself, a yearning for something more, something beyond the mundane existence she had settled into. As she closed the book and turned off the light, Julia felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. She knew she was teetering on the edge of a precipice, but the thrill of the unknown called to her. It whispered promises of passion, excitement, and escape from the confines of her life. Little did she know that this awakening would lead her down a dangerous path, one that would forever change the course of her life. The following weeks were a whirlwind of thoughts and fantasies. Julia found herself daydreaming at work, her mind drifting to the characters in the book and the wild passions they embraced. Her heart raced as she envisioned what it would be like to be desired, to be swept off her feet by someone who ignited her spirit. Yet, each time the thrill surged within her, guilt would follow, gnawing at her conscience. She loved Mark, didn't she? How could she betray him? As if the universe had conspired to test her resolve, Julia met someone who would shatter her carefully constructed world. It happened during a networking event at a chic downtown bar. She had reluctantly attended, feeling out of place among the mingling crowd of professionals. It was there that she locked eyes with a man named Alex. Alex was magnetic. His dark hair, piercing blue eyes, and confident demeanor drew her in like a moth to a flame. He was charming, effortlessly engaging everyone around him with wit and charisma. Julia felt a spark the moment they were introduced, an undeniable chemistry that crackled in the air. They spoke for hours, losing track of time as they shared stories, laughter, and a connection that felt electric. As the night wore on, Julia's inhibitions melted away. The thrill of being desired, of being seen as more than just a wife or a colleague, ignited a fire within her. She flirted with Alex in a way she hadn't done in years. The thrill of his attention intoxicating. The whispers from the book returned, urging her to embrace the darkness, to surrender to the desires that had been awakened. When the event finally came to an end, Alex leaned in closer, his breath warm against her skin. "I'd love to see you again," he said, his voice low and enticing. Julia felt her heart race at the implication, the possibility of something more. Before she could respond, a wave of guilt washed over her. She thought of Marka, of their life together, of the vows they had made. "I can't," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why not?" Alex challenged, his eyes searching hers. "What's holding you back? You deserve to feel alive, to experience passion. Life is too short to deny yourself what you truly want." The darkness within her stirred, whispering seductive promises of what could be. As she looked into Alex's eyes, she felt herself teetering on the edge of a decision that could change everything. But the weight of her commitment to Mark anchored her to the ground. "I'm sorry," she said, stepping back, creating distance between them. "I'm married." Alex nodded, a hint of disappointment flickering in his expression, but he didn't press further. "I understand," he said, his voice softening, "but know that the offer stands. You're a remarkable woman, Julia. Don't forget that." That night, as she lay in bed beside Mark, the weight of her choices bore down on her. She felt the distance between them, the chasm that had grown over the years. Mark lay asleep, unaware of the turmoil raging within her. Julia turned away from him, her heart heavy with longing and regret. The darkness whispered again, tantalizing and seductive, urging her to take a leap of faith into the unknown. The days turned into weeks, and Julia found it increasingly difficult to shake the memory of Alex. Their encounter lingered in her mind, a tantalizing thread weaving through her thoughts. She found herself drawn back to the book, the dark whisper of lust, seeking solace in its pages. Each story fed her fantasies, igniting the fire within her that longed for more. Julia began to notice the small ways her life felt unfulfilling, and Mark's long hours at work, their lack of intimacy, the silence that filled their home. She craved connection, passion, and excitement, and the more she reflected on her life, the more suffocating it felt. Then, one fateful evening, she received a text from Alex, asking if they could meet for coffee. The thrill of anticipation surged through her, battling against the voice of reason in her mind. She felt alive, invigorated by the possibility of reconnecting with someone who saw her as desirable, as more than just a wife. Without giving herself time to think, she replied with a simple yes. Their meeting was electric. As they sat across from each other in a cozy cafe tilde copyright, the chemistry was undeniable. They laughed and talked as if no time had passed since their first encounter. Julia found herself captivated by Alex's stories, his passion for life evident in every word. He made her feel special, beautiful, and desired in a way that she hadn't experienced in years. As the conversation flowed, Julia felt the walls she had built around herself begin to crumble. The whispers of lust grew louder, urging her to surrender to the moment, to embrace the thrill of the unknown. But as she looked into Alex's eyes, a part of her hesitated. What would this mean for her life, for Mark, but the thrill of being desired, of feeling alive, clouded her judgment. The temptation was too great. And before she knew it, they were lost in each other's embrace, their lips crashing together in a whirlwind of passion that ignited a fire deep within her. In that moment, Julia surrendered to the dark whisper of lust. All thoughts of her marriage, of her commitments, faded away as she was consumed by the heat of the moment. She felt alive, free, and exhilarated as they melted into each other, their bodies entwined in a dance of desire. But as dawn broke, reality came crashing down. Julia lay in Alex's arms, her heart pounding with both pleasure and guilt. The weight of her choices hit her like a tidal wave, and as she stared up at the ceiling, she realized the magnitude of what she had done. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. Panic set in as the realization sunk deeper. What had started as an escape from her mundane life had spiraled into a betrayal of the one person who had loved her. Julia's mind raced with the implications of her actions. What would happen if Mark found out? Would he ever forgive her? Would she even forgive herself? Julia? Alex's voice broke through her thoughts, pulling her back to the present. Are you okay? She turned to face him, her heart racing. Yeah, I have to go, she stammered, scrambling out of bed and hurriedly dressing. Alex watched her with a mixture of concern and confusion. What's wrong? Did I do something? No, she replied, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. It's just a broken bar. I have to get home. As she rushed out the door, her heart was heavy with the weight of her choices. Each step felt like a lead weight dragging her down, and the whispers of lust that had once thrilled her now filled her with dread. Back in her apartment, Julia felt like a stranger in her own life. She stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the walls that had once felt like home. The silence was deafening, and the guilt gnawed at her insides like a ravenous beast. She knew she had crossed a line, and there was no going back. When Mark returned home that evening, Julia plastered a smile on her face, but her heart was heavy. They exchanged pleasantries, but the air was thick with tension. Mark seemed oblivious to the turmoil within her, engrossed in his own world. As they sat down for dinner, the silence between them spoke volumes. Julia, are you all right? Mark finally asked, concern etched on his face. You've seemed distant lately. Julia's heart ached at his words. He still cared, still noticed her, but how could she explain the darkness that had consumed her? How could she admit to her betrayal? I'm fine, she lied, forcing a smile. As the days passed, Julia felt the weight of her secret suffocating her. The thrill of her affair with Alex had faded, replaced by a deep sense of regret. She had thought she could escape the confines of her life, but instead, she had only ensnared herself in a web of deceit. Every moment with Mark felt like a reminder of her betrayal. She watched as he worked tirelessly to provide for them, his dedication evident in the way he cared for their home. The guilt became unbearable, a constant reminder of the love she had tarnished. One night, unable to bear the burden any longer, Julia sought solace in the book once more. As she flipped through the pages, the seductive stories now felt hollow, echoing her own sense of loss. The darkness that had once whispered promises of passion now screamed of shame and regret. In a moment of clarity, Julia realized that she had been chasing a fantasy, a fleeting escape from her reality. The thrill of lust had led her to betray not only Mark but herself. She had allowed the whispers of desire to drown out the voice of reason, and now she was left with the wreckage of her choices. As she closed the book, tears streamed down her cheeks. She knew she had to confront her demons, to face the consequences of her actions. She couldn't continue to live in the shadows, hiding from the truth. That night, Julia made a decision that would alter the course of her life. She would come clean to Mark. She owed him the truth, no matter how painful it would be. The next evening, Julia sat Mark down in their living room, her heart pounding in her chest. "I need to talk to you about something important," she said, her voice trembling. Mark looked up, concern etched on his face. "What is it?" "You're scaring me." With a deep breath, Julia opened her heart. She told him everything, of the loneliness, the affair with Alex, the thrill that had turned into regret. As she spoke, the weight of her confession felt both liberating and devastating. She watched as Mark's expression shifted from confusion to hurt, his eyes reflecting the pain of betrayal. "I trusted you," he whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. "How could you do this?" The anguish in his voice cut through Julia like a knife. She had shattered the trust they had built over the years, and now she was faced with the consequences of her choices. "I'm so sorry," she cried, her heart aching. "I never wanted to hurt you. I was lost. And I made a terrible mistake." Mark's silence hung in the air, heavy with disappointment and betrayal. "I need time," he finally said, his voice strained. "I don't know if I can forgive you." As he left the room, Julia felt the walls closing in around her. The darkness that had once whispered promises of pleasure now enveloped her in a shroud of despair. She had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed, and now she was left to face the aftermath of her choices. Days turned into weeks, and the distance between Julia and Mark grew. He went through the motions of their life together, but the warmth had been replaced by an icy silence. Julia felt the weight of her guilt suffocating her, and she longed to turn back time, to undo the mistakes she had made. But there was no going back. The whispers of lust that had once beckoned her to embrace desire now haunted her, a constant reminder of the choices that had led her astray. In her darkest moments, Julia found herself drawn back to the book that had started it all. She read through the stories once more, hoping to find some semblance of solace. But the thrill was gone. The darkness that had once seemed so alluring now felt like a prison, trapping her in a cycle of regret. It was during one of those late-night readings that Julia stumbled upon a passage that struck her deeply. It spoke of redemption, of the power of honesty and vulnerability to heal even the deepest wounds. It reminded her that true intimacy came not from lust but from connection, understanding, and shared experiences. With newfound determination, Julia decided she would not let the darkness consume her. She would fight to rebuild her life, to seek forgiveness and healing. It would be a long journey, but she was ready to confront her past and embrace the future. One evening, she sat down and wrote a letter to Mark, pouring her heart onto the page. She expressed her remorse, her longing to make amends, and her commitment to change. It was a letter filled with vulnerability and honesty, an acknowledgement of her mistakes and a plea for understanding. When she finally handed it to him, Mark took his time reading it. The silence between them was thick with tension, but Julia held on to hope. As he finished, he looked up, his eyes searching hers. "This is a start," he said quietly. "But it will take time." Julia nodded, tears brimming in her eyes. She knew the road ahead would be difficult, but she was determined to prove her commitment through their marriage. She sought counseling, focused on rebuilding trust, and learned to communicate openly with Mark. Slowly but surely, the walls began to crumble. Mark and Julia started to reconnect, sharing their feelings and fears, learning to navigate the complexities of their relationship. They began to rediscover the love that had brought them together, the laughter that had once filled their home. As the months passed, Julia learned to embrace vulnerability and honesty, recognizing that true intimacy was built on trust, not lust. She understood that the dark whisper of desire could be seductive, but it was the light of love, commitment, and connection that would ultimately sustain her. One evening, as they sat together on the couch, Mark took Julia's hand, his expression softening. "I'm still hurt," he admitted, his voice low, "but I want to work through this. I believe we can rebuild." Tears of relief filled Julia's eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, squeezing his hand. "I'm committed to us, to making this work. I've learned so much about myself and what love truly means." From that moment on, their journey toward healing became a shared endeavor. They learned to communicate more openly, to prioritize each other's needs, and to create space for vulnerability. The dark whispers of lust no longer held power over Julia. She had embraced the light of love, commitment, and forgiveness. In the end, Julia realized that the path to true passion lay not in the fleeting moments of lust but in the depths of intimacy that come from understanding, connection, and trust. The dark whisper that had once beckoned her to the shadows became a lesson, a reminder of the strength that love can offer even in the face of temptation. And as they embraced one another, Julia knew they had weathered the storm together, emerging stronger and more resilient. The darkness that had threatened to consume her had given way to the light of redemption, illuminating a path toward a love that was deeper, truer, and far more rewarding than she could have ever imagined. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you enjoyed, then please like and share this video, and don't forget to subscribe our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.